Welcome to day 14 of the Spring 2025 Web Technologies course. This is Jim Kaufman with Rankin Technical College. So as far as our agenda for today, I want to spend a little time reviewing the hands-on test from last week. Just some areas that I kind of wanted to mention, that I think, we can improve in a little bit, and so I want to kind of go through a few things on that. And as kind of a part of that, kind of want to do a little bit of review in some areas as far as file and directory naming conventions, semantic tags, and I want to talk a little bit about some CSS units as well. So we'll kind of go through that. And then I'm going to go ahead and do a walkthrough of the hands-on test that's viewable right now in Inside Rankin, and it's due this Wednesday by midnight. And then I don't know if we're going to get through all of this, but then after that, I'm going to go ahead and do a Flexbox review because most of the the assignments this week are 3 labs. The hands-on test, which covered basically chapters 4 and 5, or kind of really look at it as from chapters 1 through 5. So that's the hands-on test this week. And then as far as the other assignments for this week are 3 lab assignments, and that's for Flexbox. And there's no written test this week. So, maybe it's a little bit lighter than what we're used to in a certain extent, but the Flexbox stuff becomes a little more challenging. It can be a struggle. So, kind of want to spend a little extra time on the labs this week. So, and then also I want to go through media queries. If I don't get to it, I might do a separate video on that. So let's go ahead and get started on the hands-on test from last week. So some things that I kind of noticed, and I kind of cut and paste some of the different students. Obviously, you don't know which students it were, was, but I kind of cut and paste different sections here, and I just kind of want to go through a few things. So the first one is, a lot of the, I don't want to say a lot, but some of the students still just, instead of having a document, that's the default for title. You want to go ahead and put a relevant document title in there, right? A relevant title. So please make sure you always put some kind of title that's relevant to your page, right? So that was the first thing. Next, I noticed that this was, I think, an example where they were showing, kind of wanted to show some of their past work they did, because part of the hands-on test was, your resume and your coursework. And so they were kind of like trying to link some chapter 4 work, here, and some of this, stuff in the past as well here. But you use localhost. You really never want to use localhost. Okay, if you want to include something, you just want to make it relevant, to your directory structure. And obviously, if you have it under a folder, you need to have your folder name first, then a forward slash, then the name of the file. But if you just have it your root directory, the same directory as this file is, then you just want to do it like that, right? And the reason for this is because, basically if this ever was like deployed to a web server or something, web server doesn't know who localhost is. And also even like for myself, when I'm grading that, my port's actually different than this. So even if I run this, in a live server, my port's different than this, and this will not show, right? So you always want to make sure that you always have it relative to the path where this document is, right? So I want to mention that. And then another thing here. So this student kind of had breaks here, and different students do different things, right? This student had breaks here in between each line. And if you notice here on the right-hand side, I know it's, it might be hard, but this section here, right here, is basically this top one here. And, so to get get this on a separate line, right? And I can understand, put a break here to get it on a separate line, right? Because that will work. But there's other ways to do this, okay? There's other ways to do this, and probably the best tag to be using for all your links, actually from a semantic standpoint, would be the navigation, the nav tag, right? And we'll look at that here down here in a couple more examples. But another thing you can do here, if you just wanted to list all of these, something you can do here for that would be, let's just get rid of these breaks and clean this up real quick. And so I'm just going to get rid of all these breaks. And then, so obviously this is all in one line up here, right? But you don't want it like that, right? So basically here, what you can do is do your style tag, right? Create a style, and I'm just doing embedded style here for this. And then for your A, what we can do is for this A tag, what you can do here is you can go ahead and do, so for the A tag, which is the anchor tag, that's an inline tag, right? We have block and inline tags, and so for an anchor tag, for the A tag, what you can do is, since it's an inline tag, what you can actually do is you can change that by doing this: display, and do let's see, and do block, right? If you do display block here and save this, as you see, it went ahead and put this in a column format, right? It actually put it on a new line because it actually took that inline tag and changed it to a style of block, and that way it's vertical now, right? And then obviously, you can always add a little bit of margin if you want below each one of them, maybe, something like this, and then I save it. Adds a little more margin, or you can even put less than that as well. That's too much. But this is just another way to, it's as instead of having the breaks, right? Usually not a good idea just have breaks all over in your page. The other thing is, I remember if we kind of looked at the non-breaking space where you do the ampersand, NBSP and the semicolon, and that's a non-breaking space. Well, I've seen people have, non-breaking spaces all over their code, and so that's usually not a good idea either. So that's this, and I'm not criticizing the students or anything. We're learning, right? We're learning, and we're trying to take what we've done and see if we can make things a little better, right? So that's that. So for now, I just want to go ahead and comment this out. And we'll get that back to that one. Okay, and then I wanted to go through this one here. So here, what the student did was went ahead and used P tags, right? Paragraph tags. And that's this second one down here, the second section on the right-hand side in the browser. Which this will work, right? This will put these each on a separate line because you're using the paragraph tag. And those paragraph tags are block tags, right? So you put another paragraph tag, it's going to put it on the next line. But the kind of, I don't want to say the problem, but the as far as from a best practice standpoint, a P tag is a paragraph tag. So that's has a certain meaning, a semantic, right? The semantic tag. So it's really a paragraph of text. It could be just a line of text, but it's basically some content, some amount of content that you're putting. And in this case, these are just links, right? We're just putting page links, right? And so a P tag is probably not what you want to do in this case, okay? So basically, we could do exactly what we did if I just left that, if I get rid of all the P tags here. And then we'd be back right to where we were with the other ones as well. We do that, it's going to end up being the same thing as what we have above here, right? And then you can just do the same thing here with your styling to display block, right? So that's one way, right? And then here's another way that students have done it. And this one, you know, I think that this has been a little more of a popular way, you know, really kind of before the nav tag came along. And I'm not saying it's necessarily wrong to do it this way, but, you know, really the nav tag is for navigation, right? So you probably should use a nav tag, but you know, this here is just a list of, and you can have anything in a list, right? And so from a semantic standpoint, you know, I guess it's not so bad, you know. So here you just got a list of things and you've got these A tags. So, but here you've got these bullets. So if you did want to, you could do this to get rid of those bullets, right? You can do the UL, right? Unordered list. And then go ahead and do list style. So we're going to do list style. And we're going to do none. And if you'll see on the right-hand side of the page here, when I do that, so that got rid of that. Now you still have this, you know, huge margin here, right? So kind of way to kind of fix that is, you know, you could set your, here you could set your padding to 0, and then after that you go ahead and set your margin to 0 as well. Save those, and that's going to move that over, right? So that kind of took care of that. You know, it's all in one line. So, you know, and obviously you can add a little, if you want to add a little margin here, you know. But by default, it's quite a big margin over there for those list items, right? So that will take care of that. And actually a good way to really, this wouldn't, really should have done this. So if you really want to, so you've got these different, you got an unordered list, right? And you've got these different list items. Probably the best way really to do this would be this. And then if you want to, you know, if you want to put a little margin, so after, so what you want to do is for after each list item, you want to go ahead and do, you do margin bottom. And just do like 10 pixels or something, right? And we're going to talk about using pixels and not, you know, you'll see a lot of code, and we've already done things where we're using pixels and stuff. But there's some benefit in doing it a different way, and we'll kind of talk about that a little bit here later today. So that's that. I think we covered that. Okay. And then... so this would be really the preferred way, okay, is use the nav, okay, use the nav semantic element, and then put your links in here, and then just style them. So, but instead of using up here, what we did was, basically it's going to be the same here as what you have here, but probably the best way to do this, because you may have different links, you know, for these simple little pages that we're doing, especially towards the beginning here, as we go, you know, further into this class, you know, further into this course, you know, the pages will become more complex, and you may have links at the top, you may have links at different places on your page, right? So sometimes you want to make sure that you state which ones they really are. You know, in this case, you know, I'm just going to do a nav A tag, right? In this case. And just boom, all of a sudden, if you've seen how quickly that changed that down here to, and then it's probably nicely, you know, portioned and everything out. So that's good. And then obviously, if you had multiple navigations on your page, then you just stick a class on this, right? Probably stick a class on this. So that, you know, bottom, you know, footer links or something equals, you know, something like that, right? as opposed, that way maybe if you had a navigation up top, so you may want them, you might want some horizontally for the bottom ones, and up top you vertically, or whatever, right? Styling might be a little different, right? So just an idea, and then you would just style your footer lengths up in your styles, right? So, and then in here, so let me show you a couple other things here. Just to point out something. Let's grab, let's go to W3. Let's just go to root here. So here, just to kind of point out, we talk about navigation. So, navigation can be in different places on the screen. So up here, you got this navigation menu, right? This is basic navigation, right? So here you've got navigation, and you might have some at the top of your screen, like in the header section or under the header section, right? I look at this being kind of the header section, and this being under the header section, okay? And then also down here, what you'll see a lot in the footer of different websites. So this, pretty extensive, pretty big footer. So here they've got all kinds of other different links, right? So you could be having a nav up at top, have a nav bar at the top, and have a nav bar at the bottom, right? So you could have it in both places, right? Just wanted to point that out. So it's not really necessarily always going to be in one place, right? You could be having navigation in different places on your page. All right. So the next thing I kind of want to go through here a little bit. So let's go through. And basically this is still discussing the hands-on test. So a couple other things I wanted to, especially because, people have turned in, a few assignments now. So as far as files and directories, best practices include using lowercase letters, hyphens to separate words, right? So like, let's go ahead and look at so something like this here. If you want to see this on the left-hand side, so the files starting with lowercase, all lowercase, and in this case, this probably isn't a good, this is more for demonstration purposes, you want to, but this is kind of a descriptive of what this is about. This is a Hot One review, right? So, but, all lowercase and using hyphens, right? To separate the words instead of, ramming it all together. So just, an idea, best practices and so forth. Definitely avoid spaces in your names, even though it'll work, but sometimes it depends on what operating system you have. Might work differently on Windows than Mac, and then there's also when you're deploying, in the real world, you deploy your web page to servers, and some of those servers use a different operating system, use a Linux operating system, so it's going to treat things differently sometimes, right? So you have to be careful that you don't have, any spaces, you don't have special characters and stuff like that in your file names, right? So you want to keep them. And then the important thing is really just be consistent. Even if, worst case scenario, if you're wrong, be consistently wrong, But, it's really best to do everything in lowercase letters with hyphens, no spaces, and no special characters, okay? And most importantly, be consistent throughout your projects, right? And your files. So let's see. Make sure you have descriptive names of your files, and there you go, consistent naming. Another thing, as far as directory structure is concerned. So, these assignments sometimes tell you to create certain names and stuff, so you just want to follow that, obviously. But I would say in the real world, and especially when we do our web portfolio, we'll be doing here in pretty much the middle of this course, close to the middle of this course, we'll start working on a web portfolio. And when we do, we're going to end up actually taking that, and we're going to be deploying that to GitHub Pages. And on GitHub Pages, you have to make sure it's going to use the index.html file. So you have to have an index.html file. And that's kind of more or less the default files for web servers as well. So just, something to keep in mind, and just, for background knowledge. So there's a reason it's called index.html, right? Because usually web servers use that. So in this case, it's just showing this is just an example. And obviously for our assignments, we might be calling files different names. But it's, in the real world, you want to have kind of a page called index.html, and that's basically your home page, right? And this is showing a different directory structure. Now, it don't have to be like this. Maybe you call it styles instead of CSS, but CSS is a good one to use. And then keep all your styles in one. I know for now, especially some of these beginning assignments, we're just keeping everything at the root directory. Some students have been using their own directories and putting files in there, which is great. But, as time goes on and things get more complicated, you definitely want to separate that out, right? If you have multiple style sheets, you want to have a CSS directory or styles directory, right? And then have your CSS in that directory. And here's JavaScript. We haven't gotten to the point in this class where we're using JavaScript, but same thing follows, same kind of idea. You want to have a JavaScript directory with your JavaScript in it. You want to have images directory with your images in it, okay? And like I said, the index.html, that's the main HTML file for your website, should always be in the root directory. Always should be in the root directory. And it's just talking about what we just kind of talked about. And here's, this is a kind of a, here it's kind of talking about this styles SCS. So sometimes what you'll end up having in real world applications, you'll have a base kind of a style sheet. And, styles.css is a good name to use. That would be kind of the styles for your whole website, maybe. So you have multiple pages, you have the styles, and then for some certain pages, you may have something specific. So what you would do is you'd use your link within your head section where you link in I'm not talking about a anchor link like we do for a page link, but for CSS, right? To include CSS, you use the actual link, LINK, to bring in a style sheet. So what you do is you bring in a base style sheet, and then after that, you bring in one that's specific to your page, okay? And that's a really good way to do that, because you may have some certain styles on that page that only is relevant to that page. But you still want to use your general style so you're consistent across all pages in your web project, right? In your website. And also it's here another idea, especially when you have multiple pages, you want to have, if you have a lot of times a header and a footer on a page will be the same, but the content between those header and footer will be different, right? For that page. So it's a good idea to share a header and a footer. So you can have a header CSS and a footer CSS. And so then you can bring them in as well. So then, that way you're reusing stuff so you don't have to reduplicate code, right? You don't want to have to do the same thing you did on a different page. If you're writing code more than once for something, then that's kind of a sign that, hey, maybe there's something I could make into something separate, right? And that could be shared by different files, right? By different HTML classes, or not HTML class, but HTML files, right? HTML documents. So I want to just talk a little bit about files and directories. And then I wanted to just go through this semantic tags again, just real quickly. So we were just kind of talking about, when we were talking about the hands-on test, we had the nav tag as a semantic tag. And, all the semantic tags are tags that's telling you something about that content, right? Something that you're doing on an HTML page. When semantic tags, as a div tag is not a semantic tag. It's just a, divider type tag, right? It's just a div tag is just a small little grouping, and you can do different things in there, but it's not a semantic tag, right? But we were looking at the nav being one, and then we had a paragraph, and we were saying, well, probably shouldn't be using paragraph tags, the P tags, for the links, right? It's more for where you're maybe writing a sentence or a couple sentences, of content, and then you use those for the p tag, right? So real quick, there's different kinds for semantic tags, different kinds. There's structural tags, and there's text level ones, right? So for the structural tag, you've got header, navigation, nav tag, main, article, section. This isn't all of them, but section, aside, footer, and so we have already been using some of these, and we'll be continuing to use some of these here this week as well. So these are some of the structural ones, and this is telling you why they're used, right? Used to define the introductory comment of your page, right? Nav's about navigation links. The main contains the primary content of the whole page, right? Articles are for articles, blog posts, news articles, forum posts, etc. Section. Now, section, this is a thematic grouping of content within a page. And so you might have a P tag and different tags, multiple P tags, and maybe some other tags. But there's some reason that this stuff is all grouped together, right? It's all grouped together. Heading, maybe a P tag, something else as well. And within that, they're all grouped together, right? They need to stay together. And so you can use a section in situations like that, okay? Aside is used for content that's related. It has something to do with the surrounding content, but it's not essential to understanding that content, right? In this case, examples, sidebars, advertisements. If you have some advertisement, you can put that in there. Sometimes just a background links and stuff that you want to display. And aside can be put in different places on that web page. It might be on the left-hand side, might be on the right-hand side, might be underneath something, right? And we're going to look tomorrow when we're going to go through a lab assignment. You're going to see how we're going to actually move that based on the size of our screen. Because for a full screen, we're going to put it on the right-hand side. But then for a smaller screen, for like a phone, a mobile device, we don't want to put it on the side of the screen. We don't have enough room, so we're going to have it vertically. We're going to put it underneath the main tag, right? So we'll look at that a little bit tomorrow. Yeah, okay. This is just showing some other ones as well. The important thing is why use semantic tags. It's because screen readers and other assistive technologies rely on these tags to understand the structure and meaning of the web content, making it accessible to users with disabilities. It's also used by search engines to better understand the content and context of the page, which can improve search engine optimization. Maintainability. Semantic HTML makes your code more readable and easier to maintain, as the tags themselves provide meaning and context. And interoperability helps to ensure that your web pages are interpreted consistently across different browsers and devices. Okay, so something to keep in mind on that as well. Couple other things I think I want to review here. So this is kind of almost a reminder that, there's some handouts. They're right on the main page. And I'll send these out as well again. But, here's handouts for HTML. There's one for HTML. There's one for CSS. There's a JavaScript one as well. But for right now, we're using HTML and CSS a lot more, right, than anything. So if you're thinking through things, well, why am I using this? Or you want to kind of review things, you got these different handouts. It tells you which ones are the empty tags, right? The meta tag and the link tag's an empty tag. You don't have content in between beginning and end tags, right? And you don't really end the tag, right? Like you do the other ones, right? And then obviously here you've got your div tag, all your other ones, telling which ones are block, which ones are inline, right? And we just kind of looked at the examples where we're talking about we took our actually our A tag. I don't even know. So our A tag's an inline tag right here, but we wanted to change that to make it block so that we can have that vertical navigation, right? That's what we did in that case, right? We actually changed the inline tag to a block tag. And that's why when students were probably doing that assignment, they'd have all their links and they say, well, it's all on one line. It needs to be it needs to be vertical. So how do I do that? And so they came up with different ideas. Some used a break, right? Some used it within a paragraph tag, right? Which we said we probably don't want to have a link within a paragraph tag. But paragraph tags are block level, right? So since they're block level, it went ahead and separated that, right? So, and then here is our CSS. So if you ever want to look, and then obviously you can always look. We look at a lot of things on W3 Schools, but if you're not looking at something on W3 Schools, you can also come in here, and it gives you a description of all the different property. I don't want to say all, but many different properties. And also, kind of want to talk about measurements here a little bit, and I'm going to go into this probably a little bit more tomorrow as well, about when to use things and when not to use things. So, we've been using kind of pixels a little bit, I know, in our code. Now, point's really more for print related, so you probably don't really want to use that much in your code. But and then we got percentage, and we're going to see. We're going to talk a little bit more here going forward, a little bit today and a little tomorrow, about some of the benefits in doing the relative and EM is relative to the current font size and REM is relative to the root size, right? And I know we touched on this last week, but we're going to kind of get into this a little more. We're going to talk about view height and view width and view height, okay? So these are important ones to understand. So for the most part, we really want to kind of be using a lot more of that. We try to stay away from pixels for the most part if we can. Probably a place where you may want to still use pixels is for like borders, because when you do the relative stuff, when it gets really small, okay, when things get really small, it kind of gets really difficult and it's tedious for a 1 pixel, 2 pixels, a small little border, right? So that in cases like that, I think it's okay to use pixels, okay? And actually, let me show you this. So this is kind of a converter. So in this is changing pixels to relational EM, right? And so here, basically, so what you can do in here, so by default, your page layout is going to be 16 pixels, right? Unless you end up changing that, okay? So if you end up changing that, then that's going to kind of change things. But by default, it's 16 pixels, right? And so 16 pixels is 1 REM, right? But what you can do here is, like, let's just say you want to make something half the size of 1 RE, right? If you want to make something for 16 pixels, right? If you want to make something 10 pixels long, or 10 pixels in width, you can use this for REM. If 16 pixels is your root size, right? If 16 pixels is your root size, and you want 10 pixels, this is what you can use in your code, right? So this is kind of a handy little tool, right? It also gives you percentages. So basically, here's points, here's your pixels, pixels, here's your REM, here's your percentage, and here's your points, okay? So this can be handy when you're trying to use relative as far, and then as opposed to fixed, okay? And we'll be getting into this a little more here in the future, just to help you with that. I was going to show you something else here real quick. So here, let's take a look at this. Let's see here. Okay. So here, so the way this EM and REM works, right, is, so here's what this will do. This will set the font size of this whole page to 16 pixels, okay? Now by default, it's 16 anyway, but I'm just showing you. So here we're setting the root font size to 16 pixels, okay? And then what we do is I have a container, right? I have a container, and don't think of a Flexbox container, call this whatever, right? But we just have a div with this container. This text uses REM, right? So what we're doing is taking our 16 pixels, right? And here for the container, we're changing it to 1.5, right? But first, we've got down here our div, we got root font. So our root font that's over here on the right, this root font is going to be just, it's in this div tag, it's going to be whatever we defined as our root, right? If we didn't even define this at all, since I said by default it's going to be 16, that kind of changed something a little bit there, didn't it, though? But you know, by default it's 16. So basically what this is going to do, this first one here, this div is going to inherit whatever the root is, because nothing else has stated that it should be different than that. So this root font here is going to be 16 pixels, okay? Here we've got this container, and what we did to this container is said, let's take the font size. So this is going to take the root font size, okay? It's saying REM, so it's going to take whatever's the root, 16 pixels, and say 1.5. So basically so if you take half of 16, which is 8, that's 1.5. Add them together, it's actually going to be 24. So this here would be 24 pixels now, okay? This will be 24 pixels. And if actually we looked at this, will this show that? Let me see here. So there you go. 24 pixels is going to be 1.5, right? And then what I'm trying to show you here, and then I've got a class parent here on this div tag, and I got parent font. So this parent font, what I'm doing is I'm just taking the font size, and here it's just making it 2. So this should be, actually, that'll be the same. So basically what I'm doing is I'm going to take the root font, which is here, and I'm going to make it 2.0, which is basically going to be 32, right? I'm going to make this, and it's going to be 32, right? Which is fine. That makes sense, right? But then I want to show you the child. And what we're doing on this child one is we're not using REM, we're using EM. And how that's different is, since this child is a child of the parent, right? And what we're going to be doing here is this is basically, it's not going to be 1.5 of the root, it's going to be 1.5 of the parent, right? So what it'll be here is, since we took the parent's 2.0, which is 32, right? It's going to be 32, right? Plus, you know, minus, right? Minus 8, right? So let's see. Okay. But if I go ahead and change this to REM, you'll see what will happen. Instead of using the parent, right, it's going to use the root. See how that changed over here? So now this is using the root and not the parent. I know it's a little confusing, but But just, you know, the important thing to remember is that a child, you know, a child's going to inherit from the parent, right? It's going to inherit from the parent. And otherwise, it's going to use what's been defined as the root level, right? All right. Let's see, what do we want to talk about next here? Okay. Okay, so let's walk through the hot. Let's do this week. So here's the hands-on test. You know, put it in your HTML hot directory. I know this doesn't say hands-on test, but you know, it's use that same directory, the hands-on test directory that you put your hot one in, same directory, same parent directory, and then under that one, put in, you know, this already exists out there. You just need to put it in there, right? So what this is you're just going to create a one-page landing page for a local non-chain restaurant. So come up with a restaurant, one of your favorite restaurants, you know, not one of the chain ones, but some other kind of one, all right? And include the name of the restaurant, include a link to their full menu. So find their menu on their website. And then make sure you use a target of _blank. And what that does is that it'll open that page in a new tab. Okay? When you do target equals _blank in your anchor tag, your A tag, that'll open it up in a new tab instead of, if not, it'll open it within the same tab, the same as the HTML you have, right? And then you're going to include a link to them on the Google Maps. Okay. So you're going to have another anchor tag, and you're going to have another target of blank to open up the map. Okay. And it's just telling you to give a header. There's your header colors. Make all the text in the header black. Okay. So let's go ahead real quick here. I want to open up have an example I want to show. An example of another student's page. A past student, previous student. Here's an example of what they did for this hands-on test. So just kind of wanted to show you, you know, they've got the menu link, right? Opens in a new page. And I got a 404 here. So obviously some menus probably changed where they had it. So they probably did it. The website changed, and so that's what happened there on that case. So, you know, you want to link to the menu, and then you also want to do a Google link, right? And let me show you something on that as well, as far as your maps and stuff. So if we come, so here's an example. Here's a restaurant on the hill called Mama's on the Hill, very popular restaurant down on the hill. So here, you know, you can search for something, and in this case, I'm just going to click maps over here. You know, you find the map of something, find the Google map of something. And then what you can do is, because, you know, if you look at you see the URL, there's a lot in here, right? You don't really want this long URL. So what you can actually do in this case is you go ahead and click on share. And you've got two different options here, send a link or embed a map, right? And so for that first one, you just want a link. You don't have to send the link necessarily here, but what you can do is there's just a link to copy, link to share. So you just copy this link. It's a lot shorter, right? A lot shorter of a link. So copy that link, and that's what you put in your anchor tag, your A tag, right? To go there, and you make sure you do underscore blank so that opens up in a new tab, right? Now, another thing I want to mention is, since we're here in this, because farther down in the hands-on test assignment, it talks about embedding the map. And so what you're going to do here is click on embed the map, and you're going to copy the HTML. And this is going to copy what's called an iframe. And you can see right here, this is an iframe, okay? And you're going to end up copying that, and you're going to be putting that into your HTML as well, the whole iframe and everything, right? So I'll mention that when we get to that point. But back to this. Here's that, and then let's go look at our directions again. So you should be good with all of this. And then the Google map, I showed you how to get the shorter link, right? So that should take care of pretty much, you should be fine with all of that. And then here's this main section, right? So you need to look, this is header. So you want to put a header tag, right? Make sure you have a header tag to put all that in, right? Then you have a main section, right? And this main section, you're going to have a Jumbotron. And a Jumbotron is just it's kind of a little bit, I think as far as from a front end web, as far as front end development, HTML, it's not as popular as it once was using Jumbotrons. I guess the concept's not quite as much as it used to be, but that's okay. We can still use it as well. There's plenty of sites out there using Jumbotrons, right? So it's include a Jumbotron, and what you do is just create a div tag and put a class of Jumbotron, right? That's all you're really doing. It's not a special thing, right? It's more or less just a style. It's a name for something that you're giving it, and then you just have a class or an ID of Jumbotron, right? And then do your styling and, just do your styling, right? And so Jumbotron is going to be 100% of the page, and you put a width of 20, right? 20 VH, right? 20 VH. Okay? And if we look at our little example here, so that's what this is here. This is the Jumbotron, right? And this is going to have a height of 20 VH and a width of 100% of the screen, right? Includes the whole screen. And then inside of here, he's got a name, he's got a phone number, and it has an address. Phone number and an address. So let's look at our things again. So your Jumbotron, you're going to use a background image. So you just find some background image, it'll work for your Jumbotron. And like I said, all you're going to do here is create, maybe like a div tag and give it an ID or a class of Jumbotron. And Jumbotron is where you're going to set your area, your width and your height, right, of the page, of that section. And then you're going to apply background image to that Jumbotron section. Set your font color. Include the name of the restaurant and an H1 tag, right? Include the restaurant phone number. And here's telling you just follow these directions. Link, so you can use, it'll be a TEL link, TEL link. So you just click on that and read that on directions on how to do that, okay? And then here, include the restaurant's full address, add geo link so the users can directly open the address in their navigation app or mobile phone devices. And basically this thing here, let's see what this is. I think that this is actually going to be, I don't know. So yeah, go ahead and do this geo thing. Follow this. Follow this. I thought that was a little different than that, but let me know if you have any questions about the basics on that. Okay. Yeah. So do the geo link. And then what you're going to do is you're going to include 5 entrees, include a short menu of 5 entrees. So basically, you're going to grab some entrees off the page of the restaurant, okay, and then put them on your HTML page, right? Short description, include the name, short description, the price. Apply different background color to each entry. Include a link to their full menu. Okay. Give the section a solid background. Just follow through that. Okay. And then here's this, when a little bit ago, we went and looked at getting the link for the map. So we had the shared a link. We just took instead of having a big long URL, we got a shorter URL by just copying that, right? But then there was that embedded one, and this is what you're basically doing here. You can follow what it says here, I guess. But this is that iframe. So it's all in that same spot right there, right? So go back to that real quickly. So if we go to share here we had the copy link to get the short link. We have embed map, copy the HTML. This is the iframe, right? Then also include a footer. We've done this before. I don't see anything that's too difficult there. Pretty straightforward. And then make sure that you validate both your HTML code and your CSS code, right? So, be careful, follow it so that you don't want to lose points on just missing something or going through it too fast. I would always suggest, especially these hands-on tests, since they're so much part of your grade. Once you get done with things, I'd go back through it one more time. After you get done with it, right, and just review to make sure. Oh, yep, did I cover all these points? It just happens. People get busy, and you start it and you stop it, and then you accidentally forget and skip something, and so you lose some points just that you really don't want to lose if you can help it, right? So please let me know if you have any questions about this. Obviously, hands-on tests, I can't help you with the coding of this, but if you have any questions about directions, let me know. I think it's pretty straightforward for the most part. And if part of Jumbotron, you can look that up if you want. But it's just more of a concept type thing than some specific code, right? Just a concept kind of thing. That's just a big area to cause, that creates attention. When you open up the thing, boom, you got this big area, right? So that's for that. All right. So we got through that part. Let's see what else we have here. Yeah, well, we're making some good progress here. Let's do a Flexbox review. All right. So, just quick little review here for Flexbox. We're going to be doing a lot of Flexbox stuff this week. So, basically, you always think of that you got a parent and children, right? So, you define your display of being Flex on your parent, right? That's how you start out. That's what you be careful. You don't want to, because and I'm gonna walk through one of the labs tomorrow. Actually, the second lab, and I'm gonna walk through that a little bit with you. And the important thing is really you got to some of this CSS stuff. You kind of change things, and then that doesn't work, and before you know it, you're changing things and putting things all over the place to try to get it to work. You know, and I understand. I've been there. I still, I still do that often as well. You know, it's like, oh, that ain't working. And then, it's because it's one of those things. It's not exact. You know, for the students that had, the C sharp stuff, things either kind of work or don't work, right? You can't just kind of get away with like anything. And with CSS and HTML, you can kind of get away with a lot, and it's just going to look different, and it's hard. You're not going to get a message saying, nope, you did this wrong. And, so it's, it can be kind of challenging, a little frustrating sometimes, right? But so remember, whenever you do a display flex, you always want to do that on the container. You don't want to start dropping display flex all over your different children, right? Your flex items, right? You want to make sure that you do that on the parent, right? So you display flex on the parent. And then you got two different directions, right? You got by default, it's always going to be row, right? And so when you have row, if you want to use the different spacing and stuff, you use the justify, right? Justify content. And then, but that's for you're justifying the content on the row level, right? So your spacing is going to be in between the part on the row, right? Each item on that row. Whereas if you do column, your spacing is going to be in between each item, after each item from a vertical standpoint, right? In a column. So that kind of flips, right? Your main access for the row is going to be left to right. For a column, it's going to be top to bottom, right? So that's the thing. You really have to think of what you're doing there, because that's why you can get really confused when, if you've got a row, justify content's going to work differently for a row than it is for a column, right? So you have to get your minds, wrapped around what you're doing at that point. If this is a row, what's justify content going to do here on a row as opposed to what's going to do on a column, right? So let's look at a little code and we'll come back here. Just let me open this up. Get rid of that. So here I just have embedded CSS. So what I do, some different examples here. So I have a kind of a row container here, a row reverse container here. And so the way this kind of works, and I kind of showed you this before, as far as the CSS is concerned, not necessarily talking about Flexbox. So when you kind of do stuff like this, what you can do is you put some styling that you want kind of shared between all your different sections, right? In this case, they're not sections, they're divs, but you define some styles in your container here, and then you have something that's more specific for this area, right? For this grouping here. So this row container is just for this grouping, right? Whereas this container here, everything defined in this style is going to be shared with all of these, right? So just point that out. So like, and up here we have a container. Here's our root, there's our body, and here's our container. So everything is going to be using, all these different sections are going to be using this, right? But then we've got ones that are for specific. So for this first grouping here, we've got a display flex, right? So we're just saying this is flex. Now we don't have a flex direction here, right? Because since by default, a row is going to be, by default, it's going to be a row, right? Unless you want to do a row reverse or you want to do a column, right? Otherwise, flex direction is row by default, right? And, always got to think when you're writing your code, you always have to kind of take that into consideration, right? That, if you see display flex and you don't see a row flex direction, you have to tell yourself, okay, I know this is a row because it's by default. So here we got this 1, 2, 3, right? So let me show you something here with that, because let's do, I want to do, so another thing is, yeah, so let's do justify content, and we'll do space around. Save that. So that's going to, put space around. We've kind of gone through all of these, right, already. And obviously you can do this yourself, all the different options you have here, right? So for the most part, space around, space between, space evenly, right? Okay. But then, so this is all done on the main axis, right? Justify content when we're talking about a row, right? When we're talking about a row, direction of row, justify content is spacing this out on the main axis, right? Now, if we want to space things out on the cross axis, which will be top and bottom, right? Right? So what we're going to do here on that one is we're going to do let's see. We want to do align items, right? We want to do align items. And let me show you something, because sometimes it can be confusing a little bit. So if we do an align items, and let's do an align items on this, okay? We're just going to do, here, actually, we don't want to do align items on that. That's where one thing, we're going to do align. Instead of align items, well, here, let's do align items. I'm sorry. So let's do align items first. Having some issue here. Align items, and let's do flex end. Okay. So if we're going to do that, so the problem with that is some things can affect other things, right? So let me get rid of this. So let's change this and do this. So yeah, so what I wasn't thinking is, you have to make sure that if you've got your container restricted, it's not going to move vertically, right? Because align items is only going to work if it's got room to move, right? And since I went ahead and made my height on this row container bigger, right? Because it was smaller like this one, so that it would go ahead and adjust, right? So like, let's go ahead and change that to, and now it's moving, right? It's doing what we expect it to do. So that's one thing that's easy to, and now it's put in the center, start, flex end, and center, right? And it's an easy thing to be doing something. You say, well, things ain't going where they're supposed to go because it's being restricted by the container, right? So if you're doing something where you've got a parent, basically the container's the parent of your items. If you've got that too small or something, it's not going to be able to expand to be able to do what you want to do, right? And the same thing here with here. And then, so let me show you align self, right? So let me see, I think I put that on here. So I have this item 1 on this one here, item 1. And so for align self here, let me show you this one. So in this case, I'm saying for just this line, this one single one, item one, which was the first one on the list, I want to make this a flex end. The others ones, whatever I had, which was center. So these are going to stay center. This one will change, right? So the aligned self, though, you're putting that, aligned self, you put that on the individual item, right? So I'm putting that on this individual item. Whereas if you want them all to be, the same, you just put it on the container itself, right? Which was here. So a lot of times you're not going to you won't be putting a lot of things on your individual items. Usually a lot of what you're going to do is in your container, right? The things that you do put, though, the things that you will put on your individual items is align self. Align self is one of them. An order, right? An order would be another one where you want to change the order, right? What else? If you want something to grow, that specific item to grow or shrink, right? You put that on the individual item, right? But everything else, when as far as the container for establishing that this is a flex container, display flex, you always put this on your container, right? You don't put this on individual items. Same thing with justify content, right? Same thing with align items, right? You're going to put this on your container, right? Like I said, on your individual items, that's where you could use align self or put the order, or you put a grow or a shrink. You put those on the individual items, right? Well, you can also put a grow here as well. You can put grow so it's all of them grow or all of them shrink. But if you want one specific one to grow or shrink, right? Just for that one, then you want to put that on that item, right? So back to this. So we've already seen flex direction row, and we just know it's easy to do flex direction row reverse, right? And there's also that, don't confuse the align items. Align items all have to do with the cross access, right? All have to do with the cross access where you're at vertically, right? The align content has to do, you're only going to use, remember, align content is only when you're wrapping. If you're not doing wrap, you don't have to worry about align content, right? So don't get those, easy to get those two confused, right? An important thing is remember that, justify content, and it's kind of a little confusing because what it's called, and so if you go back to our code here, because justify content, it says content, and then when you have align content, makes sense. You kind of think, well, that belongs, same as justify content, maybe just a little different. No, align content has to do with wrapping. Okay, so you justify content to do the spacing, right, on your page, and it has to do with along the main axis. And then the align items is the cross axis, right? So, and then we're doing the same thing with column, that's where we're flipping things, right? So let's go look at that. All right. So let's look at that, and we have our column, row, row, row. There's our column container. That's going to be this one here, right? Flex direction column. So we got 1, 2, 3, right? I'll go look at our CSS up here. Column container. So we're saying flex. Obviously for column you have to say the flex direction because default it's row. So you have to say column, right? And then kind of the same thing here. So if you're going to do, so when you do the justify here, right? Justify your content, you do say space, whatever, space around, right? You save this. Nothing's changed here, right? Well, kind of the same problem. It all depends on your container, right? And so this container is not high enough to see that happen, right? So what we could do here is we could go ahead and, in this case, what we're just going to do is we're going to put a height on here. And we're going to put a height of, let's put in 10 REMs, save it. Oh, we got a little overflow here going on. So, probably been best to, it's actually just pushing it into the other, our column container. I don't know what I'll have to look to see what I'm being, I was expecting that to be a little bigger there. Let me just do this. It's bleeding over. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is you just need to make sure, it's just how I have this set up. It's hurting me here on that. To get things spaced out, you have to make sure that your containers, has high enough, either height or width, to be able to actually space things out, right? And then just always remember your justified content for this column, right, is vertical now. The main axis is vertical, and so your align items is going to be horizontal. And so then here you can do a flex n, save that. That's going to move it over all the way over on the right hand side here. Okay. And then obviously center, etc. Right. Let's see. I wasn't going to do too much on wrap. All right, does anybody have any questions about that? Anybody who's online right now at this point? So I'm going to go over media queries here a little bit. So let me open this up. Maybe I'll just get rid of all these other tabs. All right. So media queries. So media queries isn't necessarily about Flexbox or stuff, but they're very helpful with Flexbox. They can be done with any kind of CSS as well. All right. But the whole thing with media queries is to handle different devices. Okay. To handle different device types. Okay. And actually, let me show you. This will be something that I'm going to kind of start working on that last week. I think that this is the right one. Let me see here if this is the right one. Nope. Where is the one I really want here? So I was just playing around with something that's kind of somewhat similar to like the lab exercise tomorrow, and we're going to go over tomorrow a little bit more. Actually, I just kind of probably build this a little bit for that. So here, what I kind of want to really show you is this is kind of all about responsive web design, right? And so here we've got a header section. I got some navigation, header, navigation. Got some main content here. The main contents, all of this section here, this area here, plus the products is the main section. Then I have this aside content as well. Okay, I have this aside content as well. So, but this is going to change based on screen size. So as you see, it's going to reach a certain point, and it's going to change the navigation. It's not going to be row anymore. It's going to become a column. And then our aside, we had this other aside section. It's actually, because this is going to be more mobile, right? From a mobile phone. And so actually I moved it to put it down here. You use media queries to do a lot of this, okay? To be able to move things in different places based on screen size. Okay. So here, I kind of just wanted to use this as an example as well, though. So our media queries. Okay, so this here is basically when this thing reaches a certain size, resize this window to see the effect, right? So what I'm doing here is basically I'm saying for what this does is you take within these media sections, you're saying if this minimum width is 768, so if it's once it grows to that point, when it does grow to that point, right, that it will go change the background color to light green, and it's changing the font size. Okay. Now by default, this is kind of a default setting. You can put different things in here. Okay. And let me show you that real quick. So I think we actually have that with our handouts. Let's CSS. Let me go to the bottom here. So here's media. Some media queries. So basically, if you don't put anything in there, like if you just do media only screen, it's only going to be for screen. So these media things will work for print too. So let's say you've got a website. Say you got a website where you have a lot of content in there, advertisements, different things going on, very busy page. Where if somebody wants to print that, it might not look really good. It might be fine for on the screen, but to print something like that, not too many people print websites anymore. I think sometimes a long time ago people used to do that more often. But there's cases that people do print out websites, and so if you're you just want to print out an article on that, you can print out an article, right? And so when you do something like that, you can print just that specific article and not all the other stuff around it. So in that case, people do print a lot when you can print some certain article off of the web page, right? So, but you can actually use these media queries to print for print. So when you're printing something, you can specify what you want to print and what you don't want to print, right? Well, basically, you can just get rid of everything and print only what you want, right? But there's different ones. By default, if you don't put anything, it's going to that media query will apply to everything, all these scenarios, right? Okay. But there's all kinds of different options you can put in here. I wasn't going to go through all the different options because for our assignments we don't really do that. It's more we're doing, you know, pretty much more screen than anything. Okay. I'll have to take another look to see if there's some other things as far as assignments, but I believe it's all screen stuff. So back to this. So basically what's saying when we reach the minimum width, we're actually changing some things. So this is just regular CSS that's already defined in here. Okay, it's already defined in here. So we got what responsive box and move me content. Here it is. So this stuff's already defined in here. And obviously these are just for demonstration purposes. That's why I'm calling it this. It's probably going to be more relevant to, you know, your CSS is going to be more relevant to what that specific section is or whatever, that specific text section, whatever it is. In this, I called it this because move me content, because I'm actually moving things. I'm going to move it, right? And actually I'm using, obviously you can tell I'm using Flex here, right? I'm using Flex. I have Flex defined on the container here. So here, as you can see, if I go ahead and resize this window enough, it changed the background color and also moved the text. Moved me based on size. So here we go. That's how it was, right? And then once it got to a certain width, it went ahead and changed the background color and changed this. I'm just showing you this. This is probably not really what you want to do, right? It'd be more closer to something like this, whereas we're going to start out when a bigger screen, a full screen, you're going to have all your navigation atop the front, on the top here. But when you've got a mobile device, this isn't going to work well for you, right? You need it vertical. You need it vertical. And so basically what I did on this one, and we're going to review this tomorrow, is basically when you get a certain size here, it's going to change this to vertical. And like I said, the other part is going to take this aside. This is using the aside tag. And it's going to go ahead and move that down below these two sections. This section here and this section here is all main content. Main content is wrapping both this portion and this portion. Okay, and this aside content's over here. But when we make it small enough, it's going to move this aside content after the main content on the page. Boom. And now it's down here. Okay. So that's a good example of that. But going back to this one, because it's a little easier for me to show you. So what's going to be a really handy tool for you, as you can see, we're using media queries with a certain number, right? But how do you know when it's actually really reached that number? Well, within our developer tools, right? Our Chrome developer tools, I'm going to hit F12 here. We've got the responsive dimensions, and you'll have to probably play with this because, like I said, all depends on how yours is configured. And, I know this can be kind of messy, but you have to get it to a point, right? But here, basically what you can do is you can see on the screen. So let's go look at our code real quick. When are we breaking on this? So we look at our code here. What we are doing on our code is these numbers here, these are called breakpoints. This is 768 breakpoint, 992 breakpoint, 1200 breakpoint, okay? But you have to reach that for it to break. These are called the breakpoints, right? So 768. So let's go back to where we were. And let's look at that here. So basically, we're going to do mobile. I think this is being restrained here. At what point? we go. So at 1200, yeah, when it's greater than 1200, and this is different things you can do, because sometimes it's hard to do this, but you know, so you can also do it right up in here. So at 1200, you got that. You go one more, and it's going to change. That happened based on that, right? So this is good tool for you to use to test your breakpoints. So when you get this, and make sure you've got it set at 100%, and you know, well, I guess that might not matter. But mobile, make sure it's mobile. Okay, have it set to mobile. That'll help. But once it reaches that breakpoint, it's going to change that. So that's kind of how media queries work. Quickly, we'll go through this a lot more tomorrow, because we're going to show you how to do that lab, or you're going to have to use the media queries to be able to do that lab. Where were we here? All right. Okay. I guess that's about it for today. Do you have any questions about anything?